Friends, welcome back. I'm really glad you're here. And if you're just joining us for the first time, a special welcome to you. Okay, take a seat and get comfortable because you're going to want to listen. Today, we're talking about a topic that is big these days: protein. And some of you might be thinking, ugh, you're not going to tell me to meal prep 12 chicken breasts on Sunday and carry around a protein shaker bottle everywhere I go, right? No, hard no. That's not what we're doing here. But we are going to talk about why protein is one of the most underrated, most misunderstood, and honestly, most underconsumed nutrients in midlife, and why that gap between what you're actually eating and what your body genuinely needs might be quietly driving some of the things that you've been chalking up to just getting older. The energy dips, the cravings that appear out of absolutely nowhere at 3 p.m., the recovery that now takes 3 to 5 business days instead of just one. The feeling that your metabolism has not just ghosted you, but actually blocked you. It's not a character flaw, it's not inevitable, and it's not just your age. It is possibly just a protein conversation waiting to happen. So let's have it. Okay, here's something I find genuinely fascinating and honestly a little infuriating. A lot of us, especially women, were basically taught that eating less was a form of health and wellness. Fewer calories, less fat, smaller portions, take up less space, need less, want less. And so we developed these very tidy, very controlled little eating patterns. Maybe coffee for breakfast, maybe two, a virtuous little salad for lunch, a snacky dinner, and then finding ourselves starving at 9 or 10 p.m., standing over the kitchen sink with maybe a handful of crackers or some chocolate chips and wondering why we're still hungry. And here's the thing, this pattern can feel very clean, very disciplined, very like you're doing everything right. But what it often isn't is nourishing, especially when it comes to protein. And I see this so often in my clients, eating way too little protein, but thinking that they're eating enough. And this is a problem for both women and men. Because here's the truth that the wellness world is really only just now starting to catch up on. Your body's needs change in midlife. Not because your body's betraying you or falling apart, though it might feel like that, or staging some kind of hostile takeover, but because your body is asking for different support now than it needed at 25 or even 33. And protein is one of the biggest pieces of that puzzle. So let's talk about what protein is actually doing in the body, because spoiler alert, it's doing a lot more than building biceps, which is good. We want that, and more on that in a minute. But protein is involved in muscle repair and maintenance, blood sugar stability, hormone production, and yes, our hormones are literally constructed from amino acids. So that's a big one. Immune function, satiety, as in feeling actually full after a meal, which we are allowed to want. Recovery from workouts, from stress, from just the general chaos of being a human. And healthy aging, which, when we reach this season of life, is arguably the whole point. All of these fit under healthy aging, and muscle is needed for all of these things. But the biggest reason that protein becomes especially critical in midlife is muscle. And I want to pause here because I know the word muscle can make some people tune out, like it's only relevant if you're doing a bodybuilding competition or trying to look a certain way, but that is so far from the truth, full stop. Muscle is metabolically active tissue, which means it is literally burning calories and doing metabolic work, such important work, around the clock. Even when you're sitting still, even when you're sleeping, muscle is working even when you're not. And yes, muscle looks good, but it's not just about aesthetics. It's about how your body functions today, tomorrow, and 10, 20, 30 years from now. So yes, it looks good, but all of these reasons are why we truly want to build more of it. Because muscle supports blood sugar regulation and insulin sensitivity. It supports strength and stability, so you're not grabbing the handrail at 65 or struggling with your overhead luggage and thinking, when did this happen? Muscle supports mobility and injury resilience. It supports energy levels, and it supports long-term metabolic health. And here's the part that tends to make some people sit up a little straighter. Beginning in our 30s, in meaningfully accelerating through our 40s, 50s, and beyond, we naturally start losing muscle mass if we're not actively working to maintain it. So let me repeat that. Starting in our 30s, we are naturally losing muscles if we are not actively working it out. Now, this muscle loss is called sarcopenia. Now, it's not a fringe concern or worst case scenario. It is a real, completely normal physiological process that is also completely worth interrupting. For women specifically, declining estrogen accelerates this muscle decline because estrogen plays a direct role in muscle protein synthesis, meaning it helps the body actually use dietary protein to build and repair muscle tissue. But as estrogen drops, as we hit midlife, that process becomes less efficient. And this isn't just a women's conversation, by the way. Quick note for my men listeners out there, you will experience a gradual decline in testosterone beginning in your 30s. And that testosterone also plays a direct role in muscle protein synthesis, muscle mass, strength, and recovery. It's a slower, more gradual drop than the hormonal shifts that women experience, lucky us. But it's real, it's meaningful, and it absolutely impacts how the body responds to protein and resistance training over time. So if you're a man in midlife, your recovery feels slower, body composition feels like it's shifting a little, and energy isn't what it used to be, this protein conversation is equally yours. Which means the protein that was doing the job at 35 may not be doing the same job at 48 or 50. Now, this is not a doom spiral. This is just information that we can use to stop muscle decline, like right now. Okay, so let's talk about protein needs. And I'm going to warn you, there is some math here, but stay with me because this is a part where you figure out how much protein you need. So the standard RDA, which is the recommended dietary allowance for protein, is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now, here's what this RDA number actually represents. It is the bare minimum needed to prevent deficiency. That's it. It was not designed with midlife muscle maintenance, active adults, hormonal transitions, or metabolic health in mind. It was designed to keep you from developing a protein deficiency, which is great and important, but that sets the bar extremely low. And the research has largely moved well past this. So that 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is quite a bit lower than what most of us actually need. Now, ESPN guidelines, and that's the European Society for Clinical Nutrition and Metabolism, recommend at least 1 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight for healthy adults to preserve the muscle that they have. So that's your maintenance floor, is that 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is just to maintain the muscle that you have. Now, if you're more active, managing a health condition, or actively trying to build muscle and improve body composition, which I think most of us are, research actually suggests bumping that up toward 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, which interestingly enough is also where the most recent dietary guidelines landed as well. So what this means, if you are an adult who wants to preserve and even build new muscle, you need to be eating well above that RDA of 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, eating at least 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight to maintain your muscle. But if you want to build new muscle, you should likely be eating closer to that 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Okay, so this is a lot of numbers to toss around. So let's look at what this means in real life. I want to give a few examples. I'm going to try to do this simply. Okay, so first, to figure out your weight in kilograms, this just means dividing your weight in pounds by the number 2.2 to get your weight in kilograms. Okay, so if you weigh about 132 pounds, that's 60 kilograms. That means you need to eat at least about 60 to 72 grams of protein each day to just preserve your muscle, and closer to that 80 to 100 grams of protein per day to build new muscle. Okay, and that's if you weigh around 130 pounds or so. Now, if you weigh closer to 154, 155 pounds, that's about 70 kilograms. So you'd need a minimum of 70 to 85 grams of protein to preserve what you have, but closer to that 100 to 112 grams of protein per day to build new muscle. Okay. And last example I'll give is if you weigh close to 185 pounds, that's 84 kilograms. So think closer to 84 to 100 grams minimum to just maintain that muscle mass that you have, and closer to 110 to 135 grams per day to build new muscle. And for most of us, these numbers are almost certainly more protein than we're currently eating, which is kind of the whole point of this episode. And if the kilogram math is making your eyes glaze over, a simpler shortcut you've probably heard is roughly 1 gram of protein per pound of your goal body weight. So the simple calculation is just the number of protein grams is the number that you want to eat, is the number of pounds that you want to weigh. Now, this is not a clinical guideline by any means, but as a practical daily target, for most people, it lands in a pretty reasonable range. The problem can sometimes be that it can overestimate the amount of protein that you really need to eat. And sometimes that number of protein that you should be aiming for can get really high depending on your goal weight. So just kind of looking at these two calculations together, coming up with a number that makes sense for you, your body, and your health goals. And I'll include these in the show notes so you can easily refer back to them as well. Now, here's a part that I really want you to know about because we don't hear about this enough. I think we're starting to hear more about it, but still largely undiscussed. And this is called the leucine threshold. Now, leucine is an essential amino acid that functions as the on switch for muscle protein synthesis. So pretty important. It's literally that amino acid that kind of acts as that on switch to start that muscle building process. Okay. And this is the process where you're not only is new muscle being built, but it's also repairing existing muscle as well. And research suggests that you need roughly 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine per meal to meaningfully trigger that muscle synthesis process. Okay, so what in the heck does 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine per meal look like? And in food terms, that translates to roughly 25 to 40 grams of protein per meal. And this is how the concept of maybe aiming for about 30 grams of protein per meal came about. Okay, again, this is not per day, this is per meal. And this number of like 30 grams of protein, somewhere in that 25 to 40 gram range, is actually the number I tend to use with my clients because it's a great way to keep it simple and still get close to meeting your protein needs, generally speaking. So everybody's nutrient, including protein needs, are very individualized and different. But that 30 grams of protein per meal is kind of a good rule of thumb to keep it simple. Again, even looking at that range. So for some people, aiming for more than that 30 grams of protein per meal is where they need to be. But again, just kind of aiming for that somewhere in that 25 to 40 grams range. 30 grams is just a simple number to remember. Okay, so all of this to say a 10-gram protein breakfast is not just a little light. It's really not even getting that muscle synthesis process started. And believe me, a lot of clients that I see when they come to me are eating really low protein breakfast just because it's simple. They don't know they need to be eating more. Okay, so let's move away from the numbers, which brings us to what I think is the most important thing in this entire episode. And it's that many people are not just under eating protein overall, they're eating it at the wrong times. And the pattern that I see constantly looks like this. Breakfast might be coffee, maybe coffee with oat milk, possibly some toast. Maybe lunch is something light, typically not much protein in it, eaten at the desk pretty quickly. Might be a salad, something not very filling. Again, not a whole lot of protein do I tend to see in lunches and when clients come to me. And then dinner is when they finally get some actual food, some actual protein, which means that the body has spent the entire day, or at least the majority of waking hours, without the building blocks it needs to maintain muscle, stabilize blood sugar, and support your metabolism. And then the body gets a big protein hit at 7 p.m. that it can only partially use. And research on muscle protein synthesis is pretty clear on this. The body responds significantly better to consistent protein distribution across meals over the course of the day than to one big protein event at the end of the day. So the shift here isn't necessarily always dramatically increasing the amount of protein. It might be for some people, but sometimes it's just about spreading the protein out over the course of the day, starting to eat the protein earlier, more evenly, more intentionally. Now, front loading your day with protein, even just getting, again, that 25 to 30 grams of protein at breakfast, changes how your blood sugar behaves, how full you feel, how your cravings show up, and whether your body actually has what it needs to feel supported enough to do its job. And here's the weight loss piece that we don't hear enough about. A high protein breakfast doesn't just support muscle. It literally changes your hunger hormones for the rest of the day. So we're talking lower ghrelin, your hunger hormone, and higher satiety hormones like GLP-1 and peptide YY. So less hunger, fewer cravings, less reactive eating at 3 p.m. And this is something that I wanted to share because it kind of blows my mind. There's one study that found that MRI scans have actually shown that eating a protein-rich breakfast reduces the signals in the brain that control food motivation and reward-driven behavior. Meaning that fewer cravings, less food obsession, less of that I can't stop thinking about the cookies or candy that are in the pantry energy, not because you have more willpower, but because your brain is literally getting different signals. That is not nothing. It's actually kind of everything. So just by eating protein throughout the day and just eating enough of it, you are supporting your body so it has what it needs. This is the practical shift that changes everything. It is huge. Okay, so let's talk about what this actually looks like in real life. And no, I am not going to tell you to choke down a protein shake at 6 a.m. if that's not your jam. Life is too short. But let's talk real food. Food that tastes delicious and also happens to help you hit your protein needs without requiring a nutrition degree or a meal prep Sunday, although those are great. Okay, so breakfast. Try some of these to check off that 25 to 30 grams of protein before you even leave the house or, when you get to your desk. Okay, so 2 eggs and 1 cup of Greek yogurt is roughly about 30 grams of protein, close to it. 1 cup of cottage cheese with maybe some hemp seeds, berries, and walnuts, roughly about 30 to 35 grams of protein. 3 ounces of smoked salmon on whole grain toast with 2 soft or hard-boiled eggs is roughly about 25 to 30 grams of protein. 1 cup of Greek yogurt with chia seeds and nut butter, maybe some berries, roughly 25 grams of protein. Now, if yogurt is all I'm eating, then I'll sometimes stir in a scoop or half a scoop of vanilla protein powder, and suddenly we're sitting closer to like 30 grams, 35 grams of protein at breakfast pretty easily. Savory oats with 2 jammy or hard-boiled eggs and 2 ounces of feta with black olives, roughly 25 grams of protein. I know it sounds unhinged. Try it once. Report back. Okay. So lunch. We don't want a sad death situation here. So thinking like a real salad with some real protein. And this can be easy, portable protein like leftover chicken, canned salmon, or tuna, leftover salmon. So a real salad with about 4 to 5 ounces of some kind of protein. And you'll get about 30 to 35 grams of protein. Even 1.5 cups of lentil soup. And you can increase the protein with maybe a dollop of Greek yogurt or feta, and you get roughly 25 to 30 grams of protein. Even a grain bowl with, let's say, like 1 cup of quinoa, which is a complete protein, a cup of chickpeas, tahini drizzle, roughly about 25 grams of protein. Add some feta or edamame, and you're really close to like 30 grams of protein right there. 1 can of tinned tuna, salmon, or sardines, plus a half a cup of white beans with crackers and lemon. It's roughly about 25 to 30 grams of protein. So no cooking, very easy, very portable. Okay, let's talk about a couple of snacks that actually do something. A cup of yogurt with walnuts is roughly 20 to 23 grams of protein. Again, these are snacks. 2 hard-boiled eggs is about 12 grams of protein. Add a string cheese with that. You're closer to about 20 grams of protein. 1 cup of edamame is close to 20 grams of protein. A cup of cottage cheese with cucumbers, cherry tomatoes, and a sprinkle of everything but the basil seasoning. This is one of my favorites. About 25 to 28 grams of protein. Again, these are snacks, so they don't have to hit that 30 grams, but we want to be in that like 20 grams or so, 15 to 20 grams at least for a snack, to really help us meet those protein needs. String cheese plus an apple is about 8 grams. Quarter a cup of pistachios plus some fruit or some kind of nut, about 6 to 8 grams. So great snack, not a huge protein source on its own, but we can see that these snacks really do contain some protein. Okay, and then dinner. Again, this is not the meal that tends to be as problematic when it comes to getting protein, but just want to have that bookend meal of the day be also a protein-rich meal, if that's not something that you typically have done. So we're looking at 4 to 5 ounces of salmon, quinoa, roasted vegetables. That's roughly about 35 grams of protein. 5 to, maybe 4 to 5 ounce chicken thighs or chicken breasts with roasted potatoes and salad. Again, roughly about 35 to 40 grams of protein. 5 ounces of shrimp stir-fried with edamame and brown rice, some veggies. That's about 35 grams of protein. Maybe some kind of high protein pasta, like lentil pasta with some beans and spinach, roughly about 25 to 30 grams of protein. So notice that most of these meals and snacks aren't giant portions. And the point is, this does not have to be complicated, but it does have to be intentional. Not a whole lot of intention, but it does have to be intentional. And there's a difference. Okay, now let's talk about why this matters for metabolism, because I think this is where it really clicks for a lot of people. Protein has what's called a high thermic effect, meaning your body actually expends more energy digesting and processing protein than it does with carbohydrates or fat. Roughly 20 to 30% of protein's calories are burned in the digestion process itself. So to translate, protein is doing metabolic work just by being eaten. So that's pretty cool thing. Okay, protein also dramatically supports satiety. Meals with adequate protein help reduce cravings, stabilize blood sugar, prevent that 3 p.m. energy drop, and stop the reactive eating spiral that happens when you've been running on coffee fumes and good intentions all day. And when you pair consistent protein intake with resistance training, even moderate strength work, even twice a week, a few times a week, that is where long-term metabolic health actually gets built. And here's why. Because protein provides the raw materials, those amino acids that are needed to build muscle. But the resistance training is what sends the signal. It's the trigger that tells the body we need to build and repair here. So one without the other is only half of the equation. Protein without resistance training means you have the building blocks, but no real blueprint. And resistance training without adequate protein means you're sending the signal, but the materials never show up. You need both. And the good news, you don't need to live in the gym. Research consistently suggests that even 2 to 3 sessions of resistance training per week combined with adequate protein can meaningfully support muscle maintenance, metabolic health, and body composition in midlife. 2 to 3 days. That's really the bar. So not through eating less, not through doing extreme cardio, but through building and through support. So again, your body responds to being supported. That's not a motivational poster. It's just physiology. Okay. Let's talk about a few things I see all the time that are worth naming, because sometimes just recognizing yourself in a pattern is the whole unlock. Okay, so the coffee until noon situation, caffeinating through the morning, ravenous and reactive by 11 a.m., eating randomly for the rest of the day, classic protein gap, very common, very fixable, and I see this all the time with clients. Eating clean, but not eating enough. And this one is important because you can eat beautifully, lots of vegetables, whole foods, nothing processed, and still be meaningfully under eating protein. Eating clean and eating adequately are not the same thing. This is another biggie I see with clients. They're eating well, but they're just not consuming nearly enough protein at meals. Okay, grazing instead of eating. A handful of crackers here, some fruit there, a few almonds, a mini Kind bar, a bite of something. It adds up calorically without ever creating real satiety. Because satiety requires protein and fiber together consistently in actual meals. And I see this a lot, especially in women, eating a little here, a little there. And by the way, this is not great for metabolic health. I covered this in an episode that I did earlier this year on consistent eating. I'll link to it in the show notes if you want to know why grazing is not great for blood sugar. Okay, and then again, all protein at dinner. So we talked about this. One big protein meal at 7 p.m. is not the same as protein distributed across the day. First, your muscles don't care that dinner was great and that you made up for your protein lack at the end. Secondly, some research suggests spreading the protein out over the course of the day really results in greater muscle protein synthesis over 24 hours. So it could even be the same total protein, but wildly different results. So distribution matters. And honestly, underneath a lot of these patterns is a longer history of trying to eat less food, less need, less space. And sometimes the most actually radical, actually subversive thing is recognizing that your body is not asking you to shrink. It's asking you to nourish it differently. So if your body has been feeling different lately, if your energy is unpredictable, if recovery feels harder than it should, if your workouts feel like they stopped working, if you're hungry in a way that feels kind of relentless and confusing and like it shouldn't be happening because you're eating healthy, if you're not building the muscle you want to see, protein might be one of the most important pieces of the puzzle that you've been missing. Not from a place of obsession, not from a place of tracking every gram forever and turning it, every meal into a math problem. We don't want that. But we want it from a place of genuine curiosity, of asking, what does my body actually need right now? Because here's what I want you to walk away with today. Midlife is not a decline to manage. It's a transition to support. And your body, your very capable, very acceptable, very resilient body knows how to respond when you give it what it needs. Now remember, metabolic health isn't built through restriction. It's built through regulation, through nourishment, through consistency, through showing up for your body the way you'd show up for someone that you love. That's it. That's everything. So thank you for being here, genuinely. I love getting to talk about this with you. This was a longer episode. But until next time, take up space, nourish your body, regulate first, and stay unhinged in the possible way. Now go eat some protein.